Hi, everybody. Welcome back to Beyond Profit, a Global Perspective. As you know, I'm Mark, and once again, I want to wish you Happy Trade Month, Happy World Trade Month, that is, Happy World Trade Day. So I went to a conference about trade, and I thought I would share some of what I learned. The first video that I put together was all about trade itself, but the second one focuses on what I learned in a panel discussion about sustainability and supply chain. So let's talk about it. Of course, I'd like to invite you to like this video. If it's something that you get a lot out of, share with others, subscribe to the channel. And if you want to go a step further and learn from me here at the University of St. Mary, would love to have you enroll and be part of this program. I know I mentioned in my previous videos about what a huge city Kansas City is for global trade, but I also want to acknowledge some of those local organizations that advocate international trade who were part of this and put it together, particularly the Kansas City International Steering Committee. They did a lot of work to put this thing together. I also have to mention the International Trade Council, as well as the Kansas City World Trade Center. I want to talk about sustainability and supply chain, and I'm not going to do it in a very formal way. I mean, I've got like loads of notes here that I took, and they're kind of messy, so I don't know how smooth this delivery is going to be. My purpose isn't necessarily to be smooth, but really to share some information. And I think that it's important because, you know, so much of what businesses claim to be trying to do is to incorporate elements of corporate social responsibility. That is to consider not just the shareholder as being an important part of what a business does, but that there are other significant stakeholders as well. You know, there are consumers, there are employees, and there is the community to consider as well. And sustainability is one way of thinking about what some of those responsibilities are. The United Nations has 17 sustainability goals, definitely something worth checking out. And so when businesses are talking about being committed to sustainability, they may mean different things. They may mean one of those 17 things. They may mean all of those 17 things. I'm not going to go through all of those at the moment, but I will sort of like mention them in passing as we go through. But just to sort of set up the stage, the panel discussion that I witnessed. So they had representatives from three businesses. One of them was Black & Veatch, and Black & Veatch was the place that hosted this event that I went to. So thank you to Black & Veatch for pulling that together. They have 13,000 workers worldwide. Just give you an idea of the scope of what they do. They're a global business. Another was a representative from Bayer. So Bayer also has a headquarters here in the Kansas City area. They have 500 people here working locally, but they have 100,000 people working in various locations worldwide. And the third person that they had was a guy from Berg Reinvigorations, and they are basically kind of the equivalent of a small sawmill down in southeast Kansas in Coffeyville, and they have 4 employees. So we're talking about the huge to the still really big, going to the here's a small business startup and how they approach sustainability too. So I thought it was a really interesting sort of approach. One of the things that they brought up at the start was the question of greenhouse gases and how they are measured. And I don't bring that up just because sustainability just completely has to do with the environment. It doesn't. It's a lot bigger than that. But they were talking about measuring levels of greenhouse gases, or that is the scope of what a business is responsible for. So scope 1 involves anything that a business themselves is responsible for. Scope 2 is the energy processes of everyone that they purchase from, so any of their relationships. And the third one would be emissions from everybody, even the ones that they can't necessarily control. And so when we're talking about trying to address greenhouse gases, those are three ways that you can look at that approach. But I think it's helpful, though, in sustainability also, in that what these businesses are thinking about is, what can I do personally? Like, what is my business responsible for? What are the responsibilities of the people who are my clients and my vendors, right? What can I compel them to do to approach sustainability? And then what can be done sort of in the broader sense of society? So when asked what these businesses are doing in the way of sustainability, Black and Veatch's answer was sustainable infrastructure, keeping in mind that, you know, they're a construction business. That's what they do. And so to actually build that into their designs and their approach to building, that's obviously significant. Berg talked about lumber processing that is chemical free. They do thermally modified lumber products. And so, again, something with sort of environmental sensitivity. Bayer actually said that they are committed to all 17 United Nations sustainability goals. Things like eliminating poverty, eliminating hunger, advancing gender equality, and so on. And they actually have this commitment in their annual report, which is a financial document that they have to be accountable for. So Bayer is not just talking a good game, but they're trying to demonstrate a level of accountability for that, which I'll talk about more here in a few minutes. Another question that was asked them was, how does sustainability affect the way that they approach the issue of supply chain management? And so Black and Veatch said that they reach out to suppliers and they think about how it is that they can try to influence other businesses so that they will be sustainable. So they use questionnaires on sustainability to qualify their suppliers, then use surveys to track that data. They're aware of not just environmental, but all sorts of other concerns, particularly forced labor concerns. All suppliers have to meet their code of conduct, and there are certain requirements that they have all their suppliers do. And in her words, this is something that's non-negotiable. It's part of the deal. So if they don't match that code of conduct that Black and Veatch puts out, then they're not going to deal with these suppliers. Bayer sort of focused, they say they've already sort of focused on scope one. Let's start that again. So Bayer mentioned a number of things. One is to educate their suppliers. They also have a code of conduct, focusing on health, safety, the environment. They've got everything in 21 different languages. And in short, all of the suppliers have to meet that code of conduct, show progress, or they terminate the contract. So that's an important part of what they do. Berg, coming from a small business perspective, is thinking more along the lines of, how do they treat people, right? How do they treat their employers? So they're thinking about paying employees well, offering excellent benefits, but also on the environmental end, producing sustainable lumber, working with the Department of Agriculture and the Forestry Service to determine what kind of wood they should harvest that would be best for the environment, and wondering whether or not the lumber is sustainable for their own region. Another question was, what are the business drivers behind sustainability? So for Black and Veatch, they talked about the energy transition, water and digitalization being key drivers. And the energy transition is something that she talked about quite a bit, talking about taking a risk in terms of getting rid of really what one of their core businesses was, and that was to build coal plants. And they took a risk several years ago and said, you know, we're not going to deal with coal anymore. We're going to deal completely with renewables. And so they're no longer building coal plants. Obviously, it made them nervous. But they said the market is such that that's really the direction that things are going. And that's the way they feel is the best way to approach things. Bayer was talking about the drivers being reducing greenhouse gases, and providing forms of tools that will improve the environment. Like the kinds of things that Bayer works on are, say, seeds that are genetically altered that might improve, that might make things better for farmers and for the environment as well. So if you can have, say, drought-resistant seeds, then you can have a more robust crop. Or wind-resistant crops, things that aren't just going to blow down and be destroyed and so on, like that. So they see that as things that will be helpful for the environment and also consistent with their business interests. And one thing that the guy from Bayer also really emphasized is that the people who purchase products really care about this. And I had a conversation with him afterwards as well, where he said there was a survey put out, and 17% of their stockholders indicated that the question of sustainability drives their decision to purchase stocks. And so from that standpoint, he was saying it's a no-brainer. They don't want to lose these people, and they want to attract more people. And so building sustainability into the model was also a way to attract investment. Another thing is that employees increasingly care. A lot of people don't want to work for a business that they feel is doing bad things for the environment or bad things for humanity, so to speak. So they're attracted to businesses that are going to supposedly do the right thing. That's sort of a summary of the kinds of things they talked about, and they had a question and answer, and I had the privilege of being able to ask a question myself. And my question went something like this. I'm a professor. I teach global management. We talk about this stuff in my classes all the time. And my students, perhaps rightly, are a little bit skeptical maybe about some of the corporate social responsibility claims of businesses, and are questioning about whether or not there's greenwashing, or whether or not these businesses are going to do what they say, and whether or not they're sincere in their intentions. Now, of course, these three businesses are going to come up and say, hey, yeah, we're doing a great job in sustainability, and I have no doubt that they're doing a great job in certain ways. But I did ask them to sort of maybe comment on their broader industry and talk to me a little bit about the extent to which businesses maybe are not doing that. Because one of the themes that they were sort of talking about over and over again is like sustainability. It's good for now, it's good for the future, in that we're trying to do policies that will take care of us now and not harm the next generation, right? But they also say it's good business as well. So my question is, okay, so if it's such good business, why isn't everybody doing it? Isn't there sort of sometimes a challenge to the bottom line in terms of making these kinds of changes? And so this is how these people answered that question. So Black and Veatch told me that pretty much all of their industry partners are coalescing around these sustainability standards, and that it's just increasingly becoming the norm in their industry. Bayer talked about accountability. Like I mentioned before, they have annual reports in which all of these 17 points are included, and all of the efforts in which they are doing it are documented, and then evidence is produced. And again, these are numbers that indicate like this is what we have done and this is how we can prove what we have actually done. And then they have auditors, PricewaterhouseCoopers or whoever, going through line by line, just like they're auditing the financial tools. They're also analyzing the claims that are being made in these annual reports in order to make sure that they're accurate, that Bayer's actually doing exactly what they say they're doing. And I think the guy described the process as a little bit excruciating. They're having these people go through and audit them, but it also is some testament to the fact that they're pretty sincere anyway in terms of their intents. None of them really addressed the question of cost, or sort of the concern about a race to the bottom, where wouldn't it be advantageous for some to defect from these sustainability rules if it meant that they could save some money? And in fact, I took it a step further and said that it seems to me that the three of these businesses are benefiting from differentiation in the market. That is to say, hey, look at me, I'm Berg and we're doing this special kind of wood and not everybody else is doing it, and we're good for sustainability, so please buy our products, right? It's a great marketing pitch. Is Bayer able to distinguish itself from some of its competitors as well? And like I said, these are things that they didn't really talk a whole lot about. And I don't think it's necessarily suspicious. I'm not sure that it's totally entering their imaginations. But I do think there's, say, a difference between Black and Veatch, where they're in an industry where if everybody is coalescing around these standards, then it seems to be the norm. That's what they're doing. Okay, so then there's lower risk maybe in doing the right thing, so to speak. With Bayer, though, I have to be a little bit suspicious. They purchased Monsanto, and Monsanto, of course, has been a troubled company with lots of lawsuits. One of the guys I talked to there said that Bayer is just dumping loads and loads of money on Monsanto, trying to deal with all of the problems, and kind of makes me wonder why they went with Monsanto in the first place. But it's okay. If you're not familiar with Monsanto, go Google it, check it out. It's got all sorts of legal woes and legal problems. But I also wonder, which I often do when I'm thinking about businesses, is to what extent is doing positive things in terms of sustainability over here a way to sort of say, hey, we're doing a great job, please don't pay attention to what's happening over here with some of the problems with, say, Monsanto, for example. So I'm not sure that it's, in the case of Bayer, it's quite as, mercenary as that. But it's also, it's got to be a good thing when you've got some positive things going on, despite the fact that there are, some things that aren't so great also going on in your company that you're also having to deal with. And, when I asked about Monsanto, I think that a lot of these people are just sort of doubling down on what they believe is sort of like the science. So some people might say that there are all sorts of environmental problems that come with the sort of approach that Monsanto has made toward its products. But I think that a lot of the people at Bayer would say, well, I think our science is going to win the day as far as saying that this is actually going to be more beneficial than harmful to the environment in the long run. And so I'm not going to get into that particular debate. I'm not an expert at that because my purpose really here is talking about corporate social responsibility and sustainability rather than going into the question of, the substance of whatever Monsanto and its products will do. But again, I encourage you to look into that and sort of come up with your own understanding of that. So, my takeaways. Well, I will say what I say to a lot of students is that I think that corporate social responsibility and sustainability is a luxury in some industries. If you have a lot of money, if you're in a high-end industry, and if that industry is coalescing around a common set of ideas, then it's not a huge risk necessarily to try to do things that are positive for the environment or positive in terms of those sustainability goals. I think in markets where there's a much lower margin, it's going to be a lot harder to do that because competition is going to be a lot tighter and they're going to be focused more on the bottom line and less worried about doing whatever they think is right. And so, I've spoken about that in other videos. I'll probably talk about it again in other senses, but I just think that's constantly a pressure. But I will say, though, that I'm very impressed with what these three companies are saying and reassured that there seem to be some people in the market, different businesses that are really trying to push these sustainability efforts. And I do think that it's probably, major change is not going to happen probably from the government alone or the government's ability to try to enforce these things, although I do think that's also a driver somewhat. One of the things they talked about was how environmental regulations in Europe in particular are really driving their industry to conform. But on the other hand, I also think that if businesses find something to be profitable, and lots of businesses within a sector find that to be the case, then it will make sense to move toward greater social responsibility and sustainability. Anyway, until next time, I'll see you later. Hope you learned a lot, and we'll catch you next time.